Ready?
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our event, Telling Your Story Before You Arrive and Building the Perfect Resume. My name is Art Burke, and I'm a third-year medical student at Rutgers Robert Wood and also a Tour for Diversity mentor. We have a bunch of panelists here today that are distinguished in their own right. And I'm going to pass it off to Naja for her to introduce herself and then get this event started.
Hello, everyone. My name is Naja Stevenson. I'm a senior medical recruiter with Vituity. And so I'm originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I made my way into Georgia, where I started into physician recruiting, and I've been into this field for about 12 plus years. So I enjoy working in the healthcare field and working with providers and speaking to providers every day. So that kind of really gets me going. And I'm a wife, I'm a mother, and yeah, so I'm looking forward to being a panelist today and talking about the CV, and this is my wheelhouse, so I'm looking forward to presenting today.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? My name is Langston Falk. I am from Lafayette, Louisiana, which is about 2 hours to the west of New Orleans. There are other cities in the state of Louisiana besides New Orleans. And so a lot of times, a lot of people think about Louisiana, they just think about the food and everything else, but we have a diverse group of things to do out here in Louisiana. I've been in recruiting for about 5 to 6 years. I recently just got out of the higher ed field where I was a campus director at a community college. I enjoy working here at Vituity because of the diversity, because of the culture. And so being here on this panel is something that I enjoy doing. This is something I did back in my higher ed days. So to get back into what I would call my purpose, getting back into giving back is something that I am looking forward to tonight. And so if y'all ready to rock, if y'all ready to get started, we can go ahead and get started. So Dr. Matthews, you can go ahead and share. There you go. Thank you so much. So you can go back to the first slide, Dr. Matthews. There you go. So developing a CV that will capture the attention of a prospective employer. So I'm going to be honest with you guys, I'm very unorthodox. And so I like analogies and metaphors and things of that nature. So when I look at the title, it says, developing a CV that will capture the attention of a prospective employer. The word that caught my attention was capture. So what does capture mean? Capture means the action of capturing or being captured. And so when you are applying for a job, you want to be able to capture the attention of a prospective employer, right? And so when I thought about that, I thought about something that we all have in common. Something that we probably all have in common is that we have social media. So when you set up your social media profile, what is your goal? You want to capture audience. So you're going to put things on your profile that are going to highlight some of your great qualities, some of your great distinctive things that you have accomplished or that you have done that day or something you may have done at work. So when it comes down to capturing the attention of prospective employers, I want you guys to think of it like you're setting up your social media profile, okay? Next slide. So what is a CV? I'm not sure if anybody can talk or they just can put it in the chat room. I know Ms. Danielle is on, she's gonna check the chat room. Does anybody wanna take a stab at what is a CV? Okay, I see it, good. Anybody else? Oh, we're gonna give you, we're gonna talk about that difference in a little while. Okay, cool. Dr. Matthews, you can hit the next button. So a curriculum vitae, Latin for course of life, often shortened as a CV, is a written overview of someone's life's work. Next. It provides a summary of your experience and skills. Next. Outlines details related to one's academic research and background. So when you think of your CV, It's a living document that grows as you progress in your career. You should add every new professional achievement to your CV, and it should rarely ever be deleted. So think of your CV as a marketing tool. You're marketing yourself, and it may be one of the most important documents you write in your professional life. Because your CV is like a professional advertisement, it should convince potential employers that you are an outstanding candidate for the job and that you will contribute to the organization. In short, your CV has to sell you. So I always look at CVs as a way, as a recruiter, I look at a CV as a way to, once again, market yourself. Market what are some things that you have accomplished. Market some things that you have done well. And so I encourage you guys to always brag on yourself. This is a great opportunity to brag on yourself and talk about some of the great things that you have done. Next. Always include your name, contact information, your education skills and experience, research, teaching experience, publications, grants, and fellowships, professional associations, and license awards. As you notice, that's a lot of things that you should include. So make sure that you do highlight and go over and put all those things on your CV. Next slide. So I know somebody mentioned a big resume. So a CV versus a resume. Does anybody or did anybody know that there was a difference? And you can put it in the chat. Anybody? Okay, cool. Well, your CV is something that you submit for jobs in academia, scientific research, and medical fields. It's credential based. So when I think about credential based, I had to ask myself, what does credential based mean? And so that's very important because often credential based often refers to academic or educational qualifications, such as those degrees or diplomas that you have completed or partially completed. Credentials can also refer to occupational qualifications, such as professional certificates or experience. So your CV is going to be different from your resume based on what you put on your CV. With your CV, you want to put those credentials, you want to put those certifications on there. And your CV will be a lot lengthier than your resume. Your resumes are more competency based. They are personal marketing documents intended to showcase the candidate's skills, notable achievements, and work experience to the greatest advantage. So as a medical recruiter, when I'm looking at someone's CV, I'm looking for keywords, to be honest with you. I'm looking at experience. I'm looking at what is it that makes this person stand out? What credentials do they have? Because I know that when it comes down to the medical directors, they're just going to want to make sure that you are qualified for the job. I have a lot of conversations with medical directors basically asking, what do you guys look for? And every site is going to want something different because every medical director is different. So when it comes down to your CV, you want to put as much as possible that you feel is going to make you stand out. I would also encourage you guys to look at the job description, see what it is that the job is requiring and add those into your CV. So when I talk about something being competency-based, what you're looking at is used as a way to describe a way of judging employees or people who are competing for a job by looking at a particular skill that they have. Competency-based approach to recruitment, potential recruits have to demonstrate how their experience is suitable in a number of predetermined competencies. So a CV is an in-depth look at your entire career, but back to your first job out of school. A resume is just a short highlight reel of your most relevant work achievements. So going back to that social media analogy, when you're doing a reel, it's just clips, short little clips. That will be your resume. A CV is going to be a full-length Lionsgate movie of things that you've done. Purpose of CVs are used to apply for academic positions or graduate school programs. Resumes are more used to apply for all other jobs. And as we talked about, your CV is going to be a little bit longer. Next slide, please. So why a CV and what does it stand for? We asked earlier, what is a CV? And we all know what it really is, but the true definition is creating value. We talk about creating value by what you put on there. A CV is a look into your training as a physician, and it is used as a resource for prospective employers to compare you to other candidates. It is a window into who you are, where you have been, and what you would like to do in your career. I really like this slide because it definitely talks about you. It kind of goes into in depth of who you are, where have you been, and what you would like to do, past, present, future. That's how I kind of look at it. And you want to create value in everything that you do. Creating value just doesn't begin with the CV. It goes into the interview process. It goes into the screens. So you want to create that value from the beginning on that CV. Overall, you have to ask yourself, what is your why? Remember your why when you're actually working on your CV. Remember your why when you're going through the interview process. We all have a different why, right? And I believe that when you start to look at your why, you start to be able to answer some of those questions of who you are, where have you been, and what you would like to do in your career. Next slide. Hiring manager perspective. Dr. Smith, would you like to go in and discuss a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot, Langston. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself. I apologize, everybody. I'm Christopher Smith. I'm an emergency physician by training. Currently, I'm the assistant medical director at Howard University Hospital Emergency Department. So the process goes, a lot of it is that when people apply for jobs, or from the medical perspective, when you're applying for a position, we usually go through people like Langston, recruiters. They're looking at their CV. They're looking to see who this person is. We're looking to see what we want and what we need, and they're seeing if it aligns and if it meshes well. When they come to us, when we're looking, we want to see if they're a good fit. Usually by the time when they come to us, we're looking, we know they have some of the credentials, we know they have the training, but also we want to know if they fit in a culture that they have, that in every site, every emergency department, every hospital is different. And so it's also very, very important to make sure that you, as looking for a position for whatever it is that you're looking for, that you do your research. I know it's been mentioned before, but it's very important that you do that to make sure it's the job that you're looking for. Because usually when we're looking to hire people, we know exactly what we want and what we're looking for. We want to make sure that you know what you want and you know what you're getting into. And when it gets to the interview process, we want to make sure, one, that you have an understanding of what you want and making sure that's something that we can offer you as well. Because we want to have a good long-term working relationship with you. And we want to make sure that we can satisfy each other's, basically our goals together and how we can fit those together. Sometimes places don't match well, and that's okay. But it's good to know, because when you go into that position, knowing, for example, I can speak from the perspective of emergency medicine, where you work at, the populations that you serve, the group of people that you work with, the community surrounding it. Is it this type of community that you want? Are you working in, for example, in maybe the Four Corners region or in a very rural community where you may have patients that may not see a doctor because it's 80 miles away? Or would you rather work in an inner city where you can trip over a street and find 4 doctors? So it's all those things from the perspective of a manager, from the hiring perspective. That's something that's really important. And I think there should be another slide coming up too.
Do you mind if I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Dr. Smith, even though the next step for me is applying for residency, I actually have to create a CV. I've never created one before. And since you went through a similar process, what are some things that you would suggest for people that may be applying to any other professional school or residency?
That's a great question. So just like Langston mentioned earlier, your CV is an organic document. It's something that's going to grow with you. We know when you're starting from somewhere, especially if you're coming from medical school, let's say if you're applying to a graduate program or if you're applying for an MPH or an MBA, and we see where you're coming from. So if we know you're applying for, let's say, for example, for residency, for example, after medical school, we know you're not going to have a lot of clinical experience outside of the clinical experience that what you get from any, accredited medical school. We know that. So we already have an idea. But when you're looking for a potential resident, one, when I was applying for residency, I remember I looked at myself. I looked to make sure the position I wanted to be in, as far as the specialty I wanted to be in, was what I wanted to do and what I liked. And I looked, for example, where I wanted to train at. Did I want to train all these places that you train at for residency, they're all ACGME accredited, or those are the ones you should be looking for anyway. But most of them in the United States are all, accredited. So, the training you're going to get is the training to become a competent physician in whatever specialty you have. You want to look at where you want to serve. And also you want to look at where you want to live and where you have support systems at. So it's an equally beneficial relationship that you can have between the person that's applying for the position and for the person that's seeking employment. And I'm using the employment as a rough term for residencies. It's a bit of a different type of employment. I'll be honest with you. So just everyone knows you're starting from somewhere. There's going to be some people that went the very traditional route, that went to primary school, went to high school, went to college, and then went straight to medical school. I was a non-traditional student back in the day, but I think that's more the norm now. I took some time off before I went to medical school. I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. So that's just kind of how it went. And I did some research and I did some traveling. So, just having that other outside experience proved to have some value. But when you're looking for positions, you want to make sure, one, that it's a culture that you can get along with, making sure the location is where you want to be at. Because, for example, for residency, you want to have a place where you have a good support system, whether it be family or close friends or something that you care about, or having some outlets. Because just to be totally frank and honest, no matter what you do, if you're going into residency, for example, it's going to suck. So just being 100% honest is, if you think residency is going to be great, no, it's going to suck, because it's a lot of work, it's a lot of time, and it's a culture shock. So you want to make sure you have a good social, social circle, no matter what it could be. So you want to have location, you want to make sure that where you want to go is the place that you want to go, and the people that you want to be around are people that you can be around and befriend. Because no matter what you do, you're going to get the training that you do, but you want to make sure you have that circle around you, whether it be within the training, idealistically within and without. Long answer to your short question, Robert, I'm sorry. But I wouldn't worry about having your CV being completely built up, especially when you're going for things like residency, meaning that, you're doing the things that you need to do as far as getting the experience that you had. You're going to have a baseline, and everyone's going to have that baseline, but you want to make sure you have certain things that set you apart from other people, and why.
No, I think that was a great answer, because other people like myself, or maybe people that may not have as many experiences, and not even just thinking about med school, just even applying for a job, they may not have as much opportunity as others to get as much work experience as there are other people that are applying for the same job. And I'm just wondering, in those type of situations, for maybe people on the call, like, what do you or other panelists on the call recommend for students that may be in that position?
So brief answer for that. I would say, when you're looking at where you want to go, one is find out, is it an entry-level position? Because if it's an entry-level position, that means there's room to move up. And that means that the people that are hiring you, if it's an entry-level position, they know you may not have all that experience. And a lot of times when they're putting out the request for a position, they'll have sometimes requests of, you need X amount of experience in X, Y, and Z, making sure you at least have those, because that's the core things. If you don't have those core things, they probably won't even look at you. And it's not saying that you're a bad person, but these are certain criteria they have for having this position. You have to at least have that minimum criteria. And then the kicker is that making sure that people get a snapshot of who you are, what separates you from the other applicants. And that's something that you can only do yourself. There's certain things that you can do to kind of bolster your CV or bolster your resume, depending on what you're doing. But it depends on, I always tell people, do it because you want to do it. And do it because you're comfortable talking about it. Because everything that is on that document that you have is fair game to talk about. And one thing you definitely don't want to ever do is have something on there that you may have inflated a little bit, and they want to talk about it and you can't talk about it.
I think you bring up some good points, Dr. Smith. Coming from a recruiter's perspective of fit, you mentioned fit and how important that is. And so when you talked about not fluffing your resume, you have to be careful. Like you said, be careful with that, because in that interview process, you're going to probably get asked about it and how it doesn't look very good for a candidate to not be able to speak on that. Dr. Smith, one of the things that when I first started this role, I wanted to get to know my medical directors and get to know them on a personal level, not just a professional level, because I wanted to make sure that I was understanding them and what the culture of that team is, right? And so when I looked at this particular slide, some notes that I took really resonated with me. And so I want to ask you, from for a candidate, how do you feel about a candidate that that doesn't have the self-confidence that they should? They don't come into the interview in a very confident way.
Oh, that's a great question. And the reason I love this question so much, because a lot of people, and just being 100%, a lot of our people have this imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a very, very important thing. And what does everybody know what imposter syndrome is?
Yes, sir.
Like, I'm talking about also to all the participants, not just the panelists. So, you know, for those, if they don't know, you know, imposter syndrome, feeling like, hey, I'm, you know, just for lack of a better word, I feel like I don't belong here. I feel like I may not deserve this. I feel like I'm not good enough. My brother, my sister, if you got there, guess what? You are good enough. Because as I mentioned before, like when you get to the part where you're going to get an interview, for example, you have the credentials. Like, honestly, most of the times people are just coming to make sure you're not crazy, just being 100% honest. But all jokes aside, it's very, very important to understand that, one, that you have an appropriate relationship. Thinking about having a relationship with a partner or with your friend, you want to make sure that it's a good fit. If you don't feel like, for example, that you may be good enough or worthy enough, when those things happen, I say, hey, you know, this is an interview, this is a relaxed setting. You know, yes, I understand you're applying for this, but, you know, just like how I'm interviewing you, you're also interviewing me. I mean, what if this feels like, you know, you don't feel like you fit well here for whatever reason? If you feel like, hey, you know, I'm more outgoing and all of the staff seem very kind of, you know, not talkative and kind of more introverted, and you're more of an extrovert, for example, you know, you may not feel like you fit well there, and that's okay. I mean, case in point, I remember when I was interviewing at places for residency, there was some places that were a little prestigious, excuse me, that was like, oh, this is great. And I couldn't really mesh well with the people there. You know, it kind of just felt like, you know, I guess for lack of a better term, a bad date. You know, so, and, you know, you go where you feel comfortable at and where you feel like you can succeed at. So, you know, and you want to make sure that your goals are aligned as well. If you're applying for a position, let's say if you're a physician and you're applying for a position that's a research professor and you have no research experience, you know, you may not feel comfortable doing it. If it's an entry-level position and they want to kind of build you up, then that's one thing. But if they need a research director and you're just a physician that works in the community and that just does that, then you're applying for the wrong job, and that's okay. So you got to realize, you got to know what you're going for, and don't worry about that confidence part. If you've gotten to the point where you're getting to the interview, they're already interested in you. They just want to make sure that you fit okay. And that's okay if you don't feel like you fit okay, or vice versa. That means that may not be the place for you, and you may not be happy there. There's, you know, there's so many other positions out there, and you'll find a place that meshes well with you, and that's okay. You know, and a lot of places when you interview, they'll tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly. When they don't, you know, as much as they can. When they don't tell you things, are upfront and honest with you about things, that's when you got to be a little concerned.
Sir, well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Smith. Dr. Matthews, you can go ahead and start sharing those slides again. We have a little game for you guys to a certain extent. So you can go ahead and put it in the chat. It's true or false. A CV is a working document that will grow with you throughout your career. True or false? All right, I got one true. Anybody else? Got another true? All right, Ms. Matthews, you can click. Correct. It is true. As a physician, your CV will grow as you expand in your career. An experienced physician, especially one involved in academia, may have a CV extending to 20 pages or more. Now, I'm gonna be honest with you, as a recruiter, I'm not trying to look through 20 pages of your CV. I need the main parts at the beginning, but I do understand why some people have a long CVs because they have a lot of experience, and experience can be a great thing. So I definitely can understand that. Next slide. True or false again? Should a CV be organized chronologically? Let's get the chat going. I like true. All right. Somebody's smiling. Is that a true? Oh, somebody say false. Okay, true. Let's go ahead and hit the next button. Oh, it's true. I was questioning this one, but it is true. The CV should make it easier to get an overview of an individual's full working career. It is static and doesn't change for different positions. The difference would be in the cover letter. All right. Next slide.
Oh, Langston, real quick. I just want to just make an announcement. Just we'll probably try to get to the Q&As because I think there may be some questions popping up in the Q&As. We'll get to that once we finish our little time here.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Excuse me.
All right. And the next one, references should be included on your CV. It's another true and false, you guys. Anybody else? I got one false. Anybody else? All right, let's see the answer. True and false. If you decide to include references, 3 to 5 is usually a good number, and a variety of references should be included. I'll be honest, for us, we do want 3 references. I personally like them on the CV, and because it just makes it easy on the front end, because now the hiring managers, the medical directors, they already have it. I don't have to wait to get it. So I personally like it, but once again, it's true and false. It just depends on the individual. All right, next slide. 3 things to think about when you do include references. What are they? References know they are being used. References know that they are being used. Be certain the reference is helping you, not working against you. It's something to consider. It's possible the reference will be called before you have a chance to do your part. So be very mindful who you put on your reference. I always say it's good to have people from different places, not all the same places, and people who you trust. That's a key thing here, is people who you trust. Next slide.
All right, well, so now we're gonna, and I want to just go off of some things that Langston said in reference to the references on your CV. When you do have the references on your CV, just make sure that you are updating them. I know that sounds like something that obviously people would do, but just make sure they're updated, because sometimes you might have your CV where you're not looking at your CV for a year because you're working at a site and you don't need to update it, and then you go to apply for another position and you're sending that CV off, and when we go to check those references, they may be old references. So just make sure you're keeping up with your references as well on your CV. So as far as with timeframes, I always say if you're in a 3-year program, you want to start your CV in your 2nd year. If you're in a 4-year program, it's always good to try to start your CV in the 3rd year. And the reason being, I'm going to give you a scenario. So there's a position that you're interested in, and it's in a site that you've been excited about, somewhere you've been wanting to work through residency, even before residency. So you apply to the position, but you don't attach your CV. So me as a recruiter, I'm contacting you and I ask you for your CV, but guess what? You don't have it prepared. So you're extremely busy going through residency, and you're extremely busy just in life in general. So it may take a week or even 2 weeks for me to get that CV. So what happens in that time? We have other candidates that we're speaking to and interviewing. So those candidates move through the pipeline, and you end up at the bottom of the bunch because you've waited too long to get your CV over to us. And that happens quite a bit. So I would say start getting your CV prepared as soon as possible. Even if you're in medical school, just start the CV off with your medical school information or your college information, and just keep letting it grow as you complete each step of your training. And again, time is of the essence. So if you're prepared and your CV is correct and has all the important elements in it, then you should be good to go. So the last thing you want to do is just to have you update your CV and send it back to us, because that's going to eat up your time. So we don't want that to happen. So I just want to give you a little bit of information there that'll help you with that. So moving on to the next slide. All right, so these are some elements that are going to go into what Langston said about creating value for yourself. These are things that we look for that are essential, that are going to be on the CV. So as a recruiter, there are about 5 or 6 different elements that we're looking for immediately when we open up your CV. Next. Okay. All right, so first and foremost, of course, your contact information. So we want when it says full name, your first and last name is fine. I have had CVs where it may be the first name and you may go by an abbreviated name, or you have a nickname and then your last name. So I have seen it like that too, because some people don't necessarily go by their legal name, they may go by their nickname. So as long as you're putting your legal name in there, you can include your nickname in parentheses or something in between, but typically just your legal name is fine. The address, I'm going to say the address is at your own discretion. I have had plenty of CVs without addresses on them. If you don't feel comfortable putting your full address, you can put your city and state on there, that's fine as well. And then telephone number. Cell phone is fine, and just make sure it is a telephone number that is not an old one where we can contact you whenever we need to. And then your email address. So name, I would say address is at your discretion, telephone number, and email address. Those are 3 key components that we're looking for on the CV. An objective. Now, we don't see objectives often, but if you want to add the objective in just a couple of sentences, just letting us know what you're looking for, what type of position you're looking for, just something short and sweet. I'm looking for a position in emergency medicine full-time in a level 2 trauma unit. That's fine. So just something like that so we can get an idea, but it's not something that we necessarily need. It's not anything that's required. Education, of course, you want to include your college education, residency training, when you're going through medical school, everything, all of it. So when you're doing your internship, any of your medical education, you want to include that on your CV. Professional work experience, this is going to be the biggie that we're looking for. We want to make sure that, this is a position where we're looking for 2 years of experience. You have that 2 years, and we can validate that by looking at your CV. And this is going to be the part of the CV that's probably going to grow the most. So as your career grows, your CV and your professional work experience will grow. Now, of course, if you're new in the industry, you're not going to have much experience, but we have doctors who have been in the industry for 20, 30 years, and they may be the ones who are having those 20-page CVs, or they're working locums along with their regular employment. So they may have a really extended CV. Training, your licensure. And when you're including your licensure, please make sure that you're including your active licenses along with your inactive licenses, because as part of credentialing, that is something that we ask. So just make sure that you put both of those on there so we can have all of that information there. And your board certification, when you were board certified, when it expires, and then your eligibility as well. So next slide. And these are some other items that are really going to help you create value for yourself. And this is the part where Langston talked about you're going to really make yourself a star and you can dote on yourself. And these are the things that set you apart. So do you have any honors? Were you a chief resident? Research experience? You'll be surprised how many residents I've seen that have extensive research experience on the resume. So any research experience, publications, also your citizenship, because we do have positions that will sponsor J1 visa. So you want to add that onto your CV as well. Languages. So in areas such as Miami, where they have a really high Spanish speaking population, if you speak Spanish, then obviously that's going to be a highlight on your CV. So you want to include any languages that you speak and any volunteer work. If you're doing any mission work overseas, or any of those types of things, we want to see that as well, because that's creating a whole picture. And those are the things that medical directors like to look at. Of course, you're going through your clinical education, but what else are you doing outside of that? Because those are things they're going to ask you about as well. All right, next slide. All right, so these are some of the do's and don'ts, and you can kind of look these over. Obviously, with your font, you don't want to have a font that's too small or a font that's too big. So Times New Roman 12 is usually good, 11 or 12 is usually a good place to start. And the layout. So CVs are pretty basic. I mean, when you look at them, there's not really much to them, but what goes into them is the formatting. So we want to make sure that it's going to be formatted and constructed within the right way, and it's going to flow a certain way, which we're going to look at that in a minute. Bolding. So if you're going to bold one part of your CV, for instance, if you're bolding your education, you're bolding your training, you're bolding your research, just make sure that you're bolding that the complete way down your CV because it looks neater and it looks more streamlined. So just make sure whatever part that you bold, you keep bolding that those titles or sections throughout your CV, or italicize any of your headings. Keywords, not necessary, but we put them in there. I don't come across too many CVs where we're adding keywords, but feel free to do that if you would like. And then proofread. So if you look over your CV and you think it looks good, just make sure you have another set of eyeballs on it. Maybe one of your colleagues, one of your fellow residents, your spouse, your partner. Just have someone else kind of look it over and make sure that it looks good. There's no misspellings on it, because you'll be surprised we get a lot of misspellings on the CVs. Any gaps that you have, if they're more than 3 months, you want to make sure that you explain that. You can put a short blurb on the CV next to that gap, or if it's going to be really long, like if you have a really detailed explanation as to why you have that gap, you're going to add an extra sheet of paper and explain that on that extra sheet of paper, because we have sometimes where something happens and it's going to be a few paragraphs. Of course, you don't want to put that on your CV, so just add an extra piece of paper along with your CV with that explanation. And you do not want to leave off the month and the year, because those are extremely important as to what we look for. And that is that part of your history that's going to be chronological. So we're looking at where you started and where you came from. So you want to make sure you always have your months and years on the CV. If not, I'm going to have to ask for it again for you to update it. So we don't want to do that. Pictures. Now, of course, being diverse and being diverse physicians or upcoming physicians, obviously, if you put a picture on, guess what's going to happen? You might get discriminated against. It happens. So I would advise against not putting pictures on your CV, because you don't want to set yourself back before you even get started. All right. And next slide. All right, so here are some key elements that we're looking for on the CV. This kind of gives you a snapshot of kind of the working part of the CV, meaning the work experience and some of the education. So if you notice on this particular CV, there is the month date format, and that could go either at the beginning of the sentence like it is here listed, or you can put that at the end of the sentence. So we don't care which way it goes, just make sure it's formatted with the month and the year. And they were outlining where they've worked and then in what specialty they've worked. So it's just really clean. Everything looks neat. It's easy for the medical directors to look at these and kind of go through them. Because I'm going to be honest, and Dr. Smith could maybe validate this as well. They don't have a lot of time to look through these CVs. They're not going to go through them like we have time to go through them. They're really busy. So, I mean, they may have a minute to look at these things, if that. So you want to make sure that this is formatted correctly. Next slide. All right, so this is a cover letter. We don't see these very often either, but there are times when I come across cover letters, and I actually read through these because I like to get an in-depth idea of where that particular person is coming from, and just a little bit about their background before I speak with them. So the first part of this this sample cover letter is kind of just explaining a little bit about their background. And next slide. So it's just the first paragraph is just going to introduce you, talk about what state you're looking at in your career goals, which is good because that helps me when I'm doing your phone screen, because I can get an idea of where I can start looking for employment for you before I even get on the phone with you. So if you say your desired location is in Texas, I'm going to look at openings that we have in Texas. That way I'm prepared when I speak to you on the phone. The second paragraph is just going to talk about your family ties, explain why you're choosing that particular location and some of your goals. So if you notice, there's probably each paragraph has maybe about 3 or 4 sentences in there. You don't want to make it too long because that's a lot of time. We don't have that much time, but just something that kind of gives us an idea of kind of what you're looking for, why, and some of your goals. Next one. Yep. All right, wonderful. And next slide. All right, so here we have the sample CV. And if you notice, Jim Smith, Dr. Smith has included his address, his email address, and his cell phone number. Very easy to read, very clean. If you notice, everything on here is just streamlined. He's bolded everything going down from his name to his education, board certification. So that's what I was speaking of when I said make sure that you bold everything the whole way down because it just looks neater. He decided to put his dates at the end of the sentence, which is fine, which I said. He outlined his college, his medical, when he went to medical school, his residency program, his board certifications. Now, this could be a little different. You may want to do it where you have your name, education, and training, and then include your work experience. That would probably be a better way to do it because those are a lot of the elements that we're looking for right away. The licensure is fine, but it's kind of placed up a little too high. So in this case, I would say put your work experience after your education because it's just more streamlined. It's easier for us to get to where we need to get to. So what would happen in this case is I would look at this certification and then I would just kind of look at that really quick and then skim down to see where your employment is. So just put that at the top so we can see that in there. So this is kind of just letting you know what it kind of looks like and what to expect. And then next slide. And then your honors. And this is what I was talking about. This is the things that'll help set you apart in your professional societies. If you're a part of any type of societies, diverse societies, or just anything listed all on there. And there's never too much on the CV. If you feel like it's just too much, then that means, hey, you're accomplishing a lot of things and you're going above and beyond. So just really highlight as much information as you can on here. And if it seems like it makes sense, just put it on there. Now, if your work experience included, like here, he was a lab technician. If you worked at Blockbuster Video, you don't have to put that on there, but I've seen that on the CV, but you don't necessarily have to put that on there because it's not related to your clinical experience. So if you're an EMT, for instance, you could add that on there because it does relate to a clinical aspect of your prior experience. Any presentations and publications. In here, Dr. Smith speaks Spanish, so he added that onto his CV. And his references, he decided not to add the references on, but he decided to put that upon request. So we know we can ask for those references when we get to the credentialing part. So this kind of outlines what the CV should look like. It's pretty streamlined, pretty straight to the point, but you'll be surprised how we get them. The formatting is off and like people kind of slap them together. So just really take your time, add to the CV as you go. That's the best bet because you just don't want to not have it available to us whenever we need it. Because sometimes we have to hire for positions like really quickly and the medical directors are looking for people yesterday. So you just want to make sure that we can get that right over to them after we speak with you. And that's it. Does anybody have any questions related to the CV? Any questions of what they see or any questions about what I spoke about?
Naja, we do have a question, but I'm not sure what's next on the slide before I pose the question to the panel.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you want me to just go ahead and ask it?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is for the panelist. It says, me being African, it is quite challenging to find a culture that I can fit into or blend into. Should I rather find schools whose cultures represent my own culture to some degree or blend with a school's culture that may not represent me fully, but I know is my desired school?
Dr. Smith might be a good one for answering that one.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Because I started to think for an answer. I was like, oh no, that's Dr. Smith.
So no, that's a great question. And I appreciate the candor of the question. So now, when I mentioned about being a good fit, I take it from this perspective. You know, if I made the example of being, you know, let's say I'm an extrovert and everyone that works there is an introvert. You know, there's certain realities that we have, for example, regarding culture. I'm a Black man. I'm a Black American man. My mother's from Trinidad, came to this country, and, you know, I live in America. For Black men, we make up 3% of the emergency physicians in this country. 3%. That's pretty bad. I know dermatologists, I think for Black people in dermatology, I believe it's 2%. You know, and I feel like I know like 3 of them. That means that's probably like 0.3% of them or something like that. It's abysmal. So taking that in perspective, having a culture that you can fit into or blend into, if you want, like, for example, like a Black culture or a culture where revolving around your ethnic background. You know, America's great in the fact that it's a melting pot, but we all know America got its issues, just being frank and honest. You want to find someone that you can fit well into. You probably won't find anything that's going to be exactly like you, because just certain realities that we have. And what I mean by that is, like, you probably don't want to be in a place where someone's exactly like you, because it'll be kind of boring. Imagine trying to have someone that's been around you that's just like you. You guys will argue nonstop. That's just a sociologist, me talking about it. But in all honesty, you're going to find some relating traits in places that you go to that you will build together to be a better team. Now, if you're meaning having a culture, as far as you mean people understanding certain type of I guess, for lack of a better word, what is the word I'm looking for? I can't remember the English word. It's horrible. It's called modismos in Spanish. Colloquialisms. Thank you. If you're talking about like colloquialism, things like that, that you feel like that may serve as certain barriers and everything too, there are certain ways that you can, I wouldn't have to worry about that just yet. Because I see whenever you're joining someplace, as far as medicine, you're joining a team. Not everybody's going to be a quarterback. Not everybody's going to be a wide receiver. If you're a football player, not everyone's going to be a center midfielder. Not everyone's going to be a keeper. I mean, you know, everyone's going to work together for a certain goal. And having that, if you have to find the place that you can mesh the best with, you may not have a place that's exactly everything that you want. You may. If you do, that's great. But if you don't, that's okay too. But you want to find some place that you're comfortable at the end of the day, and that people are comfortable with being who you are, and you're comfortable being around them as well. It's a tough question. And, you know, like regarding if it's a culture thing as far as ethnicity, that's always a tough thing because, like I said, we're in America. It's like if I went to a place that was very, very homogenous and I'm the only Black person there, there may be certain barriers that and some things that I'm not used to that they might be comfortable with. So it depends on what you want at the end of the day as well. I hope that answered the anonymous question. But if there's any other questions regarding that and people don't feel comfortable, if they want to bring it out here in another venue, I'll put up my email address and call. We can talk about it offline if that's okay.
I just wanted to chime in with that for that question as well. So I go to like a PWI, and I don't know what this person's like applying to, but let's just assume they're applying to either college or professional school, just so I can like answer this question and give my own perspective. So like I interviewed and was accepted to the HBCU medical schools like Howard, Morehouse, Harry. And I ended up choosing Robert Wood because I thought it was just like a better fit for me for what I wanted out of a program. And so with that, I would say, you know, go to where you think like you'll be most comfortable and you'll thrive at. And in addition to that, I'm like, there's only 2 people in my class that are interested in orthopedics that are Black. And however, I joined this program called Nth Dimensions that caters to URM students who are interested in orthopedics, dermatology, and radiology. So although I don't have many people that look like me within my class that are interested in the same field, I have this program where I'm connected to, you know, over 100 people that look like me and are interested in the same thing. So in addition to that, if your school doesn't have, let's say, a program like SNMA, which is just an organization that caters to URM medical students, you can think about, I know this is a tall task, but you can think about creating it. I created a SNMA maps for it's the same thing, but for undergrad at my college, and that's still going now. So to summarize, go where you think you'll be able to thrive and feel most comfortable. And then if you're not around a lot of people that look like you, there are other organizations out there that you could still get that, I guess, what you're like, the relationships that you're trying to achieve.
Thank you both. We have an additional question. Langston or Naja, on a CV, do you recommend extracurricular fun things on it?
I mean, you can. I've seen where people may put like kayaking or hiking and things of that nature, it wouldn't hurt. I mean, it's something that we don't necessarily have to have on there, but it surely wouldn't hurt to help kind of still add to that picture of yourself. So yeah, and honestly, it could be a good talking point if the medical director may hike or kayak or something. So it would be a good talking point too. You might have something in common with the medical director or hiring manager.
Yeah, and I'll add in there that it can't help you or can't hurt you. In my opinion, I think that it honestly can help you more, as Naja just mentioned, in terms of creating that connection with the medical director. I know when I was told years ago to add some of my my hobbies on there, it's one of the things that I look for on the CV, to be honest with you, because I want to know before I go do a phone screen, who am I talking to, so that I can have some talking points when I'm talking to that individual. So I would say, yeah, definitely add it on there. Now, don't put everything on there, but maybe 2 or 3 cool things about yourself, because it also shows that you're well-rounded as an individual. You want to make sure that people know that you're still human. We know you're in the books, you're studying and everything else, but you still have to have some form of social life just to kind of find that balance. So I would say, yeah, definitely.
Any additional questions?
There are no additional questions at this time.
Okay. Well, we do have a slide, which is our last slide that has our contact information on it. And feel free to take a picture of it if you want to reach out to either Langston or I or Dr. Smith, Daniela, and speak to us about anything offline, or if you have any questions about your CV, I would love to help you with that, or Langston can help you with that as well.
I have more so like a question and a comment. I guess my questions for you, Naja, for someone who has to create a CV soon, like I'm unsure like how old is too old when adding information to your CV. So I wonder if you can like talk about that.
Oh no, there's not old, because we have like, for instance, going back to the doctors that have worked for 30 years, we have things on their CVs from 1978 when they first went to medical school. So literally like 20 years from now, what's on your CV is going to be where you started and where you're at. So it really grows with you throughout your career. So it really gives us a true indication of the span of your career and all of the things that you've done in that career. So wherever you start now, just continue on from that, just keep adding and adding. So when you're an orthopedic surgeon or whatever you decide to be later on, we'll be able to see where you started and how you got there.
Okay. All right, thanks. And just, I guess just like my final comment as well, we didn't kind of like, I know we talked about what goes in a CV, but this is just from a student's perspective, someone who has to apply for away rotations and residency in the future, is that for those that are like a first year, like someone mentioned already on the call, you should kind of already be like crafting your CV. And you kind of want to think about the story that you want to tell. Mm-hmm. So for someone like myself, I'm interested in serving the underserved. And this interest came from during my gap years. And I did a lot of work in that. So then while I was in medical school, I became like a student doctor for this student-free clinic. Oh. Again, providing care to underserved communities. So then hopefully when I do get an interview, I can show that, okay, I'm committed to it because I did something like this in undergrad and then also med school. And I plan to do the same thing during residency and beyond. So just kind of like think about what is the story that you want to tell, and don't give up your interests while you're in professional school and beyond.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, or you just say something that was super important that kind of goes back to something I said earlier. You said tell your story, and it kind of goes back to what is your why, and that's why when it comes out to that cover letter, explain it. What is your why? Because you want to make it as personal as possible. I think that the more transparent and the more you humanize yourself in a sense, I feel like the medical directors are going to understand you as a person before they even meet you, and they were going to want to meet you. That's why I always feel like telling people your why is super, super important.
Thank you so much. I'm going to actually have Dr. Chris Smith close us out for this panel discussion. Chris.
Hey, thanks, Daniela. No, I want to really thank everyone here for coming out. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate the questions as well. I always love the engagement. Up here we have our contact information here. If you have any questions, one thing you notice here, a lot of the panelists here have this at vituity.com. Vituity is a physician partnership group that encompasses what we call the acute care continuum, and actually beyond now. We started off with emergency medicine physicians, but we staff as far as emergency medicine, OB, psychiatry, teleneurology, and it's a partnership group, and we look for future physician leaders as well. And we have, I know we're also really looking to, increase our minorities in our group as well, and we increasing our exposure on the East Coast. I've joined Vituity when I was first finished residency many, many moons ago when Blockbuster existed. Do people even know what Blockbuster is out here on the call? Yeah, see, I'm seeing no's on the panelists, but I wonder for the participants, do y'all even know? Like, please put in the chat box. Do y'all know what Blockbuster is? Well, just Google Blockbuster. It's okay. But oh, people talk about it. Wait a minute. I see Love Anani. I know a Love Anani. I hope this is not the same Love Anani that I know. But so yes, but I've been around for a little bit. All I knew has been Vituity, and I've talked to a lot of other physicians that worked in similar positions that I have, and they wish they joined Vituity sooner. It's a great program, and we're investing in our future, and we're looking to make sure that we develop future physician leaders, and we want them to be a part of our organization and our partnership as well. And I want to really thank Cameron. I worked with Dr. Matthews many moons ago as well with SNMA. So it was actually great to actually engage with her again. So it's always great. Medicine's a small world. For minority physicians, it's a bit of a double-edged sword. It's a very small world, and we want to make it bigger. So we want to make sure that everyone has the tools they have to succeed. If you all have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us. You have our email addresses, and we want to really thank you both so much for coming out. And I guess